My name is Daniel Walker, and for most of my life, I believed that loyalty was the foundation of everything. I wasn't a man who played games with people's hearts. I wasn't a man who lied, cheated, or pretended. I gave my whole self to the woman I married, because that was the promise I made to her and to myself. When I met Veronica Hart, I thought I had found the woman who shared that same fire for loyalty. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was striking enough to silence any room. Her long black hair framed a face that could shift from playful to sharp in a second. Her green eyes always carried a challenge in them, like she was daring the world to keep up with her. And her laugh, God, her laugh. It was the kind of sound that made you feel alive. She wasn't safe, but she was irresistible. We met at a dinner party thrown by mutual friends. I was the quiet one, standing near the edge of the room with a drink, while she commanded attention like the world revolved around her. She noticed me almost immediately. She walked right over, tilted her head, and said, "You don't talk much, do you?" I smiled awkwardly, not sure what to say, and she laughed like I had just delivered the best punchline of the night. That was Veronica. She pulled people into her orbit, and before I knew it, I was gone, spinning in her gravity. Our relationship moved fast. Within a year we were living together. Within 2 years we were married. I loved her with a kind of devotion I didn't think was possible. She became the sun of my sky. The reason I worked harder, dreamed bigger, planned further. I was an architect, methodical, disciplined, structured. She was the opposite, chaotic, spontaneous, unpredictable. And for a while, we fit perfectly together. She made my predictable life feel like an adventure, and I gave her the stability she claimed she had always wanted. For the first few years, I believed we had the perfect marriage. Late-night talks about our future, laughter that carried us into the early morning hours, whispered promises about the children we would one day raise. I would have given my life for her. I thought she would have done the same. But love has a way of disguising itself when it's already slipping away. The first signs of trouble were so subtle that I almost convinced my suspicion would only poison me. But suspicion was already gnawing at me from the inside. I stopped sleeping. I stared at the ceiling every night, wondering what she was doing, who she was with, whether I was already being erased from her life. The breaking point came one evening when she left her phone on the nightstand while she showered. I stared at it for 10 minutes, my heart pounding, my palms sweating, fighting the urge to pick it up. But the buzzing notifications were too much, and finally I grabbed it. At first, it looked harmless. Text from friends, work emails, the usual chatter. But then I saw an account I didn't recognize, her private email. With shaking hands, I opened it. That's when I saw his name, Damian Cross. The emails were dozens deep, going back months. My heart sank as I read the first line. I can't stop thinking about last night. My vision blurred as I scrolled through them. You taste like fire. You make me feel alive in ways he never could. When are you going to leave him? And then the one that shattered me completely. He'll never replace me. You know that. That was me. I was the man she was comparing, the man she was planning to discard like trash. I dropped the phone back on the nightstand just as the shower turned off. My stomach twisted as she walked into the room wrapped in a towel, smiling as though nothing in the world was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, asked if I wanted to order dinner. I forced myself to nod, to smile, to play along. But something inside me had broken, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. For weeks after that discovery, I carried the knowledge like a poison. I watched her, listened to her, studied every move she made. She thought she was clever, that her excuses were airtight, that her secrets were safe. But I saw the cracks. I noticed the way she slipped out for client dinners, the way she turned her phone face down whenever a message came in, the way her smile seemed brighter when she thought about him than when she looked at me. At first, I wanted to confront her, to throw her phone on the table and scream, "I know everything." But something stopped me. Rage burned hotter than grief, and underneath that rage was something sharper: clarity. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would cry, apologize, maybe even gaslight me into thinking I was imagining it. And then she would keep seeing him. She thought she was replacing me in silence, moving me out of the picture without me even realizing it. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. No, I would wait. I would watch. And when the time came, I would act. Not in anger, not in chaos, but with precision. The way I designed buildings, every detail accounted for, every move calculated. I wasn't going to confront her betrayal. I was going to bury her with it. I started by digging into Damien. His name was unusual enough that it didn't take long to find him. Social media handed me more information than I could have hoped for. Damien Cross was exactly the kind of man I despised. Flashy, arrogant, a walking ego with nothing to back it up. He posted shirtless gym selfies, pictures of overpriced cars he probably leased, captions bragging about his hustle and grind. He wasn't better than me in any real sense. He wasn't smarter, more successful, or more stable. He was just louder. And that loudness had seduced Veronica into believing he was something I wasn't. I memorized his habits. The gym he went to, the bars he visited, the friends he surrounded himself with. I learned his schedule without him even knowing I existed. I became a shadow in his life, watching, waiting. Meanwhile, at home, I played my role perfectly. I smiled at Veronica, asked her about her day, cooked her dinner, kissed her goodnight. She believed she was fooling me, that she was slipping deeper into Damien's arms without consequence. She had no idea that I already knew everything, that every lie she told was fuel for the fire I was building. Sometimes I would catch her watching me with a faint look of guilt, but she never said anything. She assumed I was oblivious. One night, as I lay awake while she whispered into her phone in the next room, I whispered something to myself. You tried to replace me, Veronica, but in the end, I'll be the one who replaces you. The words settled into me like steel. I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. I wasn't the man waiting to be discarded. I was the man holding the knife she didn't even know was there. I didn't feel grief anymore. I didn't feel despair. What I felt was power. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I knew exactly what I had to do. She thought she was playing a game, but I was about to change the rules. And when I was finished, she would understand the one truth she had forgotten. No one replaces Daniel Walker. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. The apartment felt emptier than ever, a hollow echo of memories and laughter that had once filled its walls. Veronica had moved out 2 days ago, and despite the whirlwind of betrayal that had struck him, a part of him refused to accept the truth. He lay on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every argument they had ever had, every quiet evening they spent together, and every moment that now seemed tainted by her deception. The words kept repeating in his mind, his heart behind. His mind wandered to Clara, his colleague who had always been quietly supportive, someone who had never judged him, and who had been there through late nights at work and endless conversations. She had always admired his dedication, his quiet strength, and though Daniel had never considered her as more than a friend, he now realized she was the kind of person who could help him rebuild himself. By evening, Daniel found himself at the small art gallery, where Clara had invited him for a private viewing. The space smelled faintly of oil paint and fresh canvas, a comforting scent that reminded him of something genuine, something untainted. Clara greeted him with a soft smile, one that seemed to carry no judgment, no hidden motives, just warmth. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Daniel managed a weak smile, realizing that for the first time in days, he felt a flicker of peace. They walked among the paintings, the conversation flowing naturally. Daniel found himself laughing, genuinely laughing, at her subtle jokes and keen observations. For a moment, the pain of Veronica's betrayal seemed to fade, replaced by the possibility of something new. He noticed how her eyes sparkled when she talked about the pieces, how she leaned slightly forward, so engaged, so alive. He felt a strange sense of comfort, as though he could trust her with his vulnerabilities, as though she might be the anchor he desperately needed. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel started spending more time with Clara. They worked on projects together, shared dinners, and long walks. Marcus, Clara's older brother and Daniel's longtime friend, noticed the change immediately. "She's good for you, man," Marcus said one evening, leaning back in the chair at Daniel's apartment. "She's not just a distraction. She's someone who sees the real you, someone who gets it." Daniel nodded, feeling a cautious hope stirring inside him. But part of him remained haunted by Veronica's betrayal. The thought of her laughing in Ryan's presence, of her trying to replace him, gnawed at his mind. One night, as he walked home from Clara's apartment, Daniel passed the restaurant where Veronica had taken Ryan. The sight made his chest tighten. He wanted to storm in, to confront them, to scream at the injustice of it all. But he stopped himself. He realized that his revenge wouldn't come from anger or confrontation. It would come from rebuilding his life so fully, so unapologetically, that Veronica's absence would feel like a shadow in a room full of light. Daniel began focusing on himself. He rejoined the gym, started painting again, and even enrolled in a weekend course on photography, something he had always loved but neglected. Each step of self-improvement was a quiet rebellion, a statement that his life could not be stolen by someone else's selfishness. Clara was there through all of it, encouraging, pushing, laughing, and sometimes simply sitting beside him in silence, letting him find peace in her presence. Then came the unexpected encounter. Daniel was invited to a charity gala for one of his business ventures, and as he entered the grand hall, he saw Veronica across the room, elegantly dressed, her laugh echoing as she spoke to Ryan. Daniel's first instinct was fury, but instead he smiled. He walked toward the bar, ordered a drink, and let the sight of her happiness wash over him in a strange, freeing way. He realized he didn't need to confront her. He didn't need to prove anything. His life was moving forward, and he was reclaiming it piece by piece. Over the next few months, Daniel's transformation became evident to everyone around him. He was more confident, more focused, and undeniably more magnetic. Clara noticed it first, the way his presence filled a room, the way people gravitated toward him. Their friendship deepened, evolving naturally into something more profound. They shared quiet nights on the balcony of Daniel's apartment, talking about dreams, fears, and everything in between. Daniel found himself opening up in ways he never had with Veronica, and Clara responded with patience, understanding, and genuine care. One afternoon, Marcus called him urgently. "You need to see this," he said, handing Daniel his phone. It was a social media post from Veronica. She had tried to flaunt her new life with Ryan, posting pictures, stories, and updates that were meant to show happiness, meant to provoke him. Daniel scrolled through the images, feeling a flicker of old pain, but then he saw the captions, the tiny cracks in the perfection, a forced smile here, a tense pose there, moments that betrayed her discomfort. He realized then that her attempt to replace him had failed, not because he had sought revenge, but because she had tried to build a life on superficiality, on appearances rather than substance. Daniel decided to host a charity auction, an event where he could showcase his growth and, inadvertently, reveal the life he had rebuilt. He invited friends, colleagues, and partners, ensuring Clara and Marcus were by his side. The evening was a resounding success, filled with laughter, music, and genuine connections. Veronica attended, of course, as part of the social circle, and she noticed the difference immediately. Daniel was vibrant, confident, and undeniably in command of his life. She realized that she had underestimated him, that her attempt to replace him had presence, meant to provoke, only underscored her failure to disrupt the life he had created. Ryan, equally silent, realized that Veronica's attempt to find happiness in the shadow of betrayal was hollow, lacking the authenticity and depth that Daniel now embodied. Weeks later, Daniel and Clara decided to take a trip, a small journey to the countryside, away from the city, away from reminders of the past. They walked through fields of wildflowers, laughed under the sun, and shared stories late into the night by the fire. Daniel felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Each step away from the city, each conversation, and each shared silence with Clara reinforced that his life was no longer defined by Veronica's choices, but by his own strength, resilience, and the genuine love he had found. The turning point came when Daniel received a call from Marcus. "You need to see this," Marcus said. On the screen were photos of Veronica and Ryan, not in the glamorous moments she posted online, but in the mundane, awkward instances that revealed the cracks in her facade. Daniel felt a brief twinge of satisfaction, but it was not the rush of revenge he had imagined. It was a quiet acknowledgement that life had balanced itself, that truth always found a way to surface. Daniel and Clara returned to the city with renewed energy. Their relationship blossomed further, a combination of friendship, passion, and unwavering support. Daniel's work thrived. His social circles expanded, and he finally felt unburdened by the chains of the past. Veronica's occasional presence became a faint echo, a reminder that some people are only meant to pass through, to challenge, to catalyze growth, but not to remain. In the quiet moments, Daniel reflected on everything. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, and the subsequent journey had shaped him into a man he barely recognized at first, but a man he now admired. He understood that replacing someone's life wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation, about proving through action rather than confrontation that one could reclaim happiness, integrity, and peace. And in that realization, Daniel smiled, knowing that the true victory wasn't in revenge, but in living fully, authentically, and courageously. Clara, sensing his thoughts, squeezed his hand gently. "You've come a long way," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, a sense of gratitude and love swelling in his chest. "We've come a long way," he corrected softly, knowing that it wasn't just his journey, but theirs together. The days continued, filled with small triumphs and quiet joys. Daniel discovered new passions, from painting landscapes to volunteering at local shelters. Clara joined him in these endeavors, their bond strengthening with each shared experience. Marcus often teased them, reminding Daniel how far he had come from the man who had once felt lost and betrayed. And every night, as Daniel lay beside Clara, he realized that the life he had rebuilt was not only richer, fuller, and more meaningful, but it was also undeniably his own. Through it all, Veronica and Ryan became faint shadows of the past. Daniel no longer felt anger or bitterness, only a calm assurance that he had risen above the chaos. The betrayal that had once threatened to break him had, paradoxically, become the very thing that allowed him to flourish. And with Clara by his side, he knew that the future held possibilities he had never dared to imagine. Daniel sat in the quiet of his study, the soft hum of the evening city drifting through the half-open window. The room smelled faintly of cedar from the bookshelves lining the walls, a comforting scent that had always grounded him in moments of chaos. But tonight, no scent, no book, no memory of the familiar could comfort him. He had spent weeks replaying every conversation, every lie, every moment that had led him to this point, and the weight of it pressed down on his chest with relentless force. Veronica's betrayal had been more than a wound. It was a gaping chasm in the life he had painstakingly built. And yet, as he stared at the photograph of Clara laughing in the sunlight, holding the small coffee cup he had bought her that morning, a strange sense of resolve settled over him. It was not revenge in the simple sense. It was something far more intricate, a meticulous orchestration that required patience, precision, and a clarity that Daniel had only found in the depths of his despair. He would not merely replace Veronica in his life. He would replace the void she had left in hers, showing her that the consequences of betrayal were more than just abstract. They were lived, felt, and unavoidable. He rose from his chair and walked over to the window, watching the neon reflections shimmer across the rain-slicked streets. The city had a rhythm, a pulse that seemed to echo the calculated beat of his own plan. He had contacted Marcus earlier that day, briefing him on the final phase of what they had been building together. Marcus had been more than a friend in these weeks. He had been a confidant, a strategist, and in many ways, the moral compass Daniel sometimes lacked. Yet tonight, Marcus's eyes had mirrored the same grim satisfaction Daniel felt, a sense that this was not just justice, it was restoration. But she's forgotten one thing, the consequences of underestimating the person she wronged. Clara smiled faintly, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "Then let's finish this for good." They spent the next hours going over the final steps. The plan was complex, involving careful manipulation of Veronica's social circle, subtle exposures of her duplicity, and the strategic placement of truths that could not be denied. It was not about humiliation for its own sake. It was about clarity, making sure that the reality she had hidden from everyone, including herself, was laid bare in a way she could not ignore. The first phase began with subtle moves. Old acquaintances who had noticed Veronica's inconsistencies were approached, gently questioned, and reminded of the small lies that had built up over months. Messages were strategically sent, innocuous enough to seem coincidental, but charged with enough detail to start the unraveling. Daniel watched as the initial tremors began, Veronica's controlled facade, showing small cracks. Her calls to friends became defensive, her confident strides through social gatherings now tinged with hesitation. Meanwhile, Daniel and Clara cultivated their own narrative, one of growth, resilience, and authenticity. Every public interaction, every casual mention of past events, subtly highlighted Daniel's transformation and the stark contrast to Veronica's fractured world. Marcus provided backup, meticulously documenting and corroborating details, ensuring that when the culmination arrived, no one could claim coincidence or misunderstanding. Weeks passed, each moment meticulously recorded and each step carefully calculated. Daniel's heart remained steady throughout, though he allowed himself rare moments of reflection. He thought of the years lost to trust and hope, the nights spent doubting his worth, and the quiet pain of betrayal. But he also felt the rare bloom of hope, the knowledge that he had created something resilient from the ruins. Then came the evening that would mark the final phase. Veronica had been invited to a gathering under the pretense of a celebratory reunion, unaware that the stage was set not for her triumph, but for her reckoning. The room was elegantly lit, the soft murmur of conversation blending with the gentle strains of piano music. Guests chatted, unaware of the careful orchestration behind the scenes. Daniel entered with Clara at his side, their presence immediately drawing attention. Veronica's eyes widened, a flash of recognition and panic crossing her features as she saw him. She tried to maintain composure, adjusting her posture, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. Daniel's approach was calm, measured, each step deliberate, each word chosen with surgical precision. "Veronica," he said, voice low, carrying a weight that caused her to instinctively straighten. "It's been a while." "Daniel," she managed, a brittle smile forming. I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," he replied, though his tone suggested the opposite. "But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" The crowd began to sense a tension that was not entirely social. Whispers spread, glances exchanged, and Daniel's quiet authority commanded attention without raising his voice. He began to recount events, innocuously at first, highlighting moments that subtly undermined Veronica's constructed reality. Clara's supportive presence amplified the narrative, her laughter and casual remarks painting a picture of Daniel's grounded, fulfilled life in stark contrast to Veronica's unraveling. By the time he revealed the documented proofs, messages, witness accounts, and carefully timed exposures, Veronica's carefully maintained image crumbled entirely. The whispers grew into murmurs, and murmurs into open acknowledgement. She had not anticipated this level of scrutiny, nor the precision with which Daniel had executed it. For the first time in months, she felt the full weight of consequence. Daniel did not gloat. He did not raise his voice or mock. His calm, composed demeanor conveyed something far more powerful: control, integrity, and the quiet triumph of resilience. As Veronica attempted to speak, to explain, to deflect, the room collectively absorbed the truth, leaving her with only the stark reality she had tried so hard to conceal. When the night ended, Daniel walked out with Clara beside him, the city lights casting long reflections on the wet streets. There was no celebration, no boastful victory, only the deep, steady rhythm of justice fulfilled and life restored. Veronica remained behind, facing the consequences she had ignored for too long, and Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a release not born of revenge, but of resolution. Clara squeezed his hand, her warmth a reminder of what had been gained through patience, intelligence, and the courage to face betrayal head-on. "It's over," she said simply. "Yes," Daniel replied, voice soft but resolute. "And this time, we build something that lasts." The nights that followed were quieter, marked not by tension or betrayal, but by reconstruction and hope. Daniel and Clara navigated the delicate process of rebuilding trust, both with themselves deceit. In the months that followed, Daniel and Clara built a life defined by shared goals, mutual respect, and the quiet joy of everyday moments reclaimed. They traveled, laughed, argued, and reconciled, each experience layering depth onto a foundation that had been painstakingly rebuilt. Friends and family noted the transformation, witnessing a man once marred by betrayal, now thriving in partnership and purpose. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, Daniel and Clara stood on the balcony of their apartment, a soft breeze tugging at the edges of their clothes. The world below was alive with motion, but up here, there was only the two of them and the calm certainty that they had endured, overcome, and finally claimed a life worthy of the trials they had faced. Do you ever think about how different things would be if it hadn't happened? Clara asked, voice gentle, almost a whisper against the evening wind. Daniel considered this, looking out over the horizon, the city lights beginning to flicker on. Sometimes, he admitted, but I've learned that it's not about what happened. It's about what we do with it. And right now, I can say we've made something better than I ever imagined. Clara smiled, leaning into him. Then let's keep building it together. Yes, Daniel agreed, the word carrying a weight of commitment and the quiet satisfaction of a journey concluded. Together. And in that moment, with the city sprawling endlessly beneath them and the night sky stretching above, Daniel knew that the pain of the past had been transformed into the strength of the present. The story of betrayal and consequence had reached its conclusion, leaving behind not emptiness or regret, but the promise of a life fully reclaimed, fully lived, and fully loved.